the most important supplements, like a general supplement list for optimal health that would work for the most amount of people, what would be your core supplements?
The Vitamin D Council recommends 40 to 100. When you're looking at cases like autoimmunity, osteoporosis, even neurodegenerative changes, low hormone issues, even weight loss resistance, insulin resistance, these types of things, you want that vitamin D to be optimal.
I think we've heard this over and over and over. What is supplement number 2?
Just because of how many enzymatic reactions it has in the body with magnesium. Magnesium oxide, that will make you go to the bathroom. That's number 2.
What modifications are we making or are we adding for the autoimmune overweight patient trying to lose weight?
Every muscular contraction in the gut is a neuromuscular function. The best way to know what you need is to get your...
Welcome everybody back to the Lasting Weight Loss Podcast with Dr. Jones, and always honored to have you on the show, Mr. Kellams. This is every time we chat, it's a pleasure, man. And I've always looked at you as the functional wizard because amount of knowledge you possess when it comes to this functional space. I mean, I've talked to so many functional practitioners, but like I've always known from I met you, like you're very technical, you're very much comprehensive in how you approach things. And so it's always a pleasure to have you back on the show. And I'm excited for episode number 2, man.
Yeah. Every time we see each other, whether it's, doing the podcast, anytime we get to hang out for dinner, it's always such a wonderful time. And our conversations always go down so many different rabbit holes, but I'm so happy to be here and do take 2 and dive into new waters with you. So thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. Let's not keep people waiting. They know this is the Lasting Weight Loss Podcast. So everything that I'm trying to do is just bring awareness down this difficult and really failing thing, which is battling obesity and lasting weight loss. But got some great questions lined up. So let's just dive right in. So when we look at, obviously supplements are a very important pillar for optimal health. And, we have to have some amount of optimal health for losing weight. But before we even get into weight loss specifically, like to help our listeners out there, if you had to boil down the most important supplements, like a general supplement list for optimal health that would work for the most amount of people, what would be your core supplements? And let's get into the dosing and everything.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's a great question. And, I think one of the real key things for people to understand is the caveat to this is the best way to know what you need is to get your micronutrient testing, and that's something you and I have always talked about. So as we're going through this, of course, there's huge exceptions, but we could just look at like the correlated data of like this huge collection of all the patients that we typically look at. What are the big deficiencies that we see the most? From the get-go, vitamin D, and that's not to be on the vitamin D bandwagon.
Right.
It's like, at one point we were keeping track. And I think the last time we actually had a tally from all the labs that we had ran starting in 2016 up to 2021. And this is averaging about anywhere from, early on, it was around 50 labs a month up to, around 125 labs a month. And in that span, we had less than 15 people that have optimal vitamin D levels.
Wow.
So the chances that someone has excellent vitamin D is super low, and it's needed for, over 39 different tissues. It's actually considered like a prohormone.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly important for the body. And so, a lot of people think, I get plenty of sunlight, and, you and I, we know that that's just not enough.
Right.
So you have to supplement, and if you're going to try to get enough vitamin D from sunshine, it needs to be full body. So, you're looking at a possible nudist colony. And then, that's a whole other podcast,
Right,
but I usually
Ignis to the sun.
yeah, right. that what is that perineum bathing?
Yeah, well, we maybe we'll do a podcast about that in the future. So what are the optimal the vitamin D levels? Because standard panels say anything above 30 is great, and a
Yeah.
lot of functional practitioners say the higher the better. But then I've been seeing a lot of like, well, let's back up off this. Too much vitamin D is a problem, and so where do you fall on vitamin D? Has that changed in the last couple of years?
No, I mean it's always stayed about the same. Like you said when you were introducing me, I'm crazy technical about it. So I wanted to know why there was an upper limit, and so I like it. I want to see 55 to 100, and I prefer around 75. That seems to be the sweet spot. So and the vitamin D council recommends 40 to 100. And, when you're looking at cases like autoimmunity, osteoporosis, even neurodegenerative changes, low hormone issues, even weight loss resistance, insulin resistance, these types of things, you want that vitamin D to be optimal. The problem is twofold with vitamin D. When you're taking it, and usually to get it there, it's really, really hard. But you do have hypermetabolizers, people who when I say that, they take it in and they have excellent vitamin D receptors. When we run genetics, a lot of people have these vitamin D, these VDR receptor mutations on their genes, but some people can readily absorb it. So every now and then you'll have somebody who's on 2,500 to 5,000 IUs, international units a day, and all of a sudden they're skyrocketing. That's why it's good to get an initial level and then check it a few months later. But I've never seen anybody just blow it up like super fast. I mean, when people are low on vitamin D, they'll give them 50,000 IUs once a week, which you're going to get rid of what you don't need. So of 2,500 to 5,000 IUs a day, I think is really, really good. Get your levels checked out. The concern is twofold, like I was saying. One is vitamin D can add to an inflammatory response or some calcification, and you don't want accumulation of calciums and plaquing. So vitamin K, MK, yeah. So that's what you want to take with it. And if you're on the lower levels of like 2,500, I use a vitamin D a day. I like the MK7 version of vitamin K. You want that to be about 45 micrograms.
Okay.
That's on the lower end, but it's a good amount. Um, when vitamin D, so the other fold to that, whereas if it's not without vitamin K, or if it's with vitamin K, you're offsetting one of the more harmful aspects of it. But when you're on the upper limits of it, it has been shown that vitamin D typically starts to become toxic when it hits 300 nanograms per deciliter. And like I said, we like it about 55 to 100. I like 75 is a sweet spot. But we find that some people, they start having symptoms of toxicity, which can be neurological, can be delirium, at around 250. So if I see somebody and their vitamin D crosses like 110 to 120, I'm like, hey, let's back it off. So that's and there's a lot we could talk about vitamin D and why it raises at certain points in the inflammatory thing. But there's two vitamin Ds to look at. You want 25-OH, and then you want the immune active version of vitamin D, which is 125-OH, and that's also called calcitriol. So getting those measures, know where you're at, hitting about 2,500 to 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day with about 45 micrograms of vitamin MK7 is a really good combination. Make sure you don't get above like 120. That would keep it pretty safe.
Right, right. And do you see any benefit for cycling your dose seasonal wise? Summertime less. Like, is there some? Do you actually practice that, or it doesn't really come out in practicality?
No, I think there's a lot of people, if they are active and they're out quite a bit, they can probably half that dose. Like if they're on that 5,000 IU a day, they can drop that down to about 2,500. And I'll go periods of time where I'm just not consistent with my vitamin D. But other times, it's like especially through the winter, late fall, winter, early spring. That's the time where most people need more of it. They're not getting as much sunlight. And the other caveat to that is people who have like really compromised digestion. Those people, If you don't have a gallbladder, if you have compromised digestion, you may need to stay on the upper levels of that year round.
Gotcha. And I mean, for people that just want to keep it simple, just not even worrying about the seasons, if their body's not going to have any issue with taking. Yeah, that's what I've always preached. Okay, so that vitamin D, I think we've heard this over and over and over. What is supplement number 2? Numero dos.
So I went back and forth with this after you talked about it. So I'd say the second one, just because of how many enzymatic reactions it has in the body, would be magnesium.
Magnesium.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with magnesium. There's so many. The Biooptimizers has the 7 types. That's a really good one. I'm a huge fan of magnesium threonate, just like getting it to the brain, feeding the nervous system. Everybody needs a little bit different. Something that's a little bit more gentle on the gut is the glycinate or biglycinate or bisglycinate. Magnesium oxide, that will make you go to the bathroom. That's number 2, but it's harsh. It's a harsh one on the body. But magnesium, I'd say on the lower end, 300 milligrams a day of your choice, and you can switch them up. It has probably been something you've noticed. You have some people that take one type and they're like, I don't notice anything. Other people take a different version and they're like, man, this has changed my life. Everybody's a little bit different. So find what works for you, switch them up, maybe try the Biooptimizers. What version of magnesium do you typically recommend? Because I know that is one that you like.
Magmine. So the magnesium threonate, I do Magmine. And I find that we're doing magnesium threonate the most just because of its ability to calm and improve sleep quality. And, our patients, we're trying to, it's weight loss, right? Specifically, as opposed to you're working on a little bit of everybody, right? So any ability to optimize sleep as well for the weight loss is a big deal. And so we like threonate for that reason. And then we'll do, because they're on GLP-1 medications, the slowdown of the GI transit, we want to keep them moving. So we do recommend some extra magnesium. And so I'll throw glycinate in the morning.
Okay.
But it's interesting though, and I kind of want to talk about this. I don't mind getting into my personal stuff here, but you recommended, because I couldn't figure out why my stools were a little bit softer. I'm not going to go more in depth to anybody listening than that. Dr. Jones had some softer stools, and I was talking to Dan, like, what could be the problem? And, I backed off my glycinate in the morning, didn't even take the other things he talked about yet. And all of a sudden my stools normalized pretty fast. So quick minute here. I wanted to tell you guys about my free resources to help you guys with your sustainable weight loss goals. I have a free Facebook community where I do weekly live coaching. It's all about helping you hit your goals and maintain your weight for the rest of your life. And I also have a free PDF where I break down step by step exactly what it takes for you to be successful. I'll put a link to this in the show, and we'll see you guys back in the show. I completely stopped the glycinate in the morning. I'm still taking about 200 of threonate in the evening. So I was probably going to play around with adding a smaller dose of glycinate in the morning to see what happens. But I mean, it was pretty fast within 2 days, Doc. 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so the mag threonate, so because it's hitting the nervous system, and one of the things we have to keep in mind is the mesenteric nervous system is the nervous system of the gut. That's the second brain. And so a lot of times magnesium threonate will move the gut because every muscular contraction in the gut is a neuromuscular function. And so you can actually stimulate the gut. And that's one thing that's, if someone is having a nervous system response that's slowing down the gut, threonate's actually going to be better. If it's just because there's a depletion in electrolytes or you need to flush the gut, the glycinate's going to be a little bit stronger. But if someone has any brain issues, brain fog, and we've gone back and forth, and I don't, we don't do any specific treatments like you do. You're the specialist, you're the guy I'd send anybody to for weight loss or any of the GLP meds. But with those cases, I'd say, all right, is this a person that typically gets muscle cramps and stiffness? Glycinate's probably the way to go. If this is a nervous system response to a medication, I think the threonate may be enough.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So magnesium, vitamin D, and it's I'm glad you're mentioning those, because I do think at least when you pay attention to the functional realm, you're hearing more and more about those two among everything else. So I'm glad that we're on the same page there. Supplement number 3. What is it? What is it?
I'm gonna go with fish oil.
Yes, yes, I'm doing it right. You didn't just pick my
Yeah.
list. Thank God. That's
No, I
all.
don't even know your. Yeah,
Those are on my list. So this is great. This is great. Okay. And I'm guessing it's not fish oil per se. It's the essential fatty acids, right? They can get it from algae. They can get it from. Okay, great. Okay, great.
yeah. I just like fish oil because if you're getting it from other than the algae source, which I think is going to have DHA and is lacking EPA, one of the two. The amount of available DHA and EPA that you're going to get from fish or an algae source is so much higher than you would from, like, let's say you're taking a
Great
flaxseed
oil.
oil
Yeah.
or anything like that. The amount of conversions to get down to that EPA and DHA is so convoluted. I think 0.5%. I believe this is years ago when I had looked into this. Like 0.5% of flaxseed oil actually makes it down to EPA, DHA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Massive difference. So yeah, fish oil. 1,000 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams when people have some arthritic conditions. If they're having some really severe hormone issues, I go a little on the higher end. You just need it. It's so important for your neurons, your synapses. You need it for your hormones, your prostaglandins, all priming all these hormone receptor sites. It's just wow. You can't. It does so many things. It's hard to not put that on the list. I had trouble. I was going back and forth with this vitamin D or fish oil. Which one's the most important?
Right. Right. I didn't give you a number too, so I was like, let's just see what he comes up with. But yeah, no, that is definitely on mine. And then I'll just tell you, see how close we're thinking since we haven't talked about the list. So obviously, the electrolytes is unique because of the fasting. So outside of that, for me, it's curcumin, resveratrol, only because I'm seeing so much inflammation issues with overweight patients. But I'm curious, do you have one before that, or is that your next one? Or kind of
No,
combo?
I go back and forth with our patients because the next two that I see, and we're just talking about relative deficiencies in our patient group, is either going to be a B12, B9, folate, methylcobalamin, or zinc. Those two, man, they take the cake between a B12 and folate deficiency and a zinc deficiency. So those are going to be my next two, like, alternates.
And so for you is just, again, population, years of experience testing so many patients, you see those a lot more frequently. And that's interesting because I don't hear too much, as far as that those being common, the folate
Yeah.
and the zinc. What does it look like symptom wise, for say zinc deficiency when you're working with a patient?
Zinc is usually, yeah, so zinc deficiency is hormonally, you're going to get a lot more acne. If you look at most of your topical acne, cystic acne medications, they're zinc based. And so you get a lot of skin issues. In our patient base, we'll see a lot of infertility. And the other thing that goes along with that, and the reason it tends to be low, is the absorptive ability of zinc is depending on the health of the gut. And so if there's any biofilm producing bacteria, any gram negative bacteria, any yeast that's growing in the gut, you'll see vitamin D and zinc together. And that's why we see those so much, because we get a lot of fertility cases, we get a lot of chronic gut issues, and then we'll get a lot of the autoimmune cases. And zinc is really critical, has a role to play with the liver in an enzyme called alkaline phosphatase, which is our alk-phos, which is a zinc metalloprotein. So you need zinc for that. So I think because either stress on the liver, dysfunction in the gut, or the utilization that we'll see when it comes to hormones and keeping the skin healthy, that's where you'll see that zinc.
Gotcha. Wow. There's some gems there. Definitely some gems. Okay. So does that end your list of saying that the general most encompassing for most people?
Yeah, and I'd say if I was going to throw two other generics on there, I didn't know how long you wanted to go. I'd say my next two runners up would be uh, definitely electrolytes because everybody's dehydrated, and and that's a soapbox that I'm sure you get on and that I get on is hydration is electrolytes and water.
And water. Yep.
Yeah, and then the next runner up would be a very targeted probiotic.
Wow. So curcumin and resveratrol did not even make your list. That's got to be the secondary runner ups, right?
Yeah. Those are intervention specific. When I'm saying generic, I'd say what a person needs and can get by on because I mean we're really looking at the essential nutrients here that I think are the most critical.
Yes, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So if we looked at the exact same question, but now we took the population and we said not just general health, but now we're 100 people general health. Now we're talking 100 people that are all overweight. Same question,
Okay.
core supplements. And if it's a lot, I'm assuming a lot of it's going to be the same. So it's really the question is there any differences knowing that your population is all overweight now?
Yeah. So, man, that's a great question, and I thought a lot about this, and I'd say, and I go back and forth on the dosing, but the first would be L-carnitine because L-carnitine, when we're overweight, we're going to have increased lipids, and to be able to lose that weight, we need to mobilize those lipids, those fatty acids, break down that triglyceride, and L-carnitine is responsible. There's actually something called the carnitine shuttle that when we're looking at in specifically the metabolism of fat by the mitochondria for energy is our beta oxidation. And part of that to occur to get those fatty acids into the membrane space of the mitochondria, I know we're going down a really nerdy rabbit hole,
Let's do it.
is you need that carnitine shuttle. So the research on carnitine is not only does it improve metabolic and cardiovascular health, because it improves the lipids. So you're mobilizing these lipids, reducing triglycerides, reducing your total cholesterol. It can actually help increase your HDL cholesterol at the same time. So it helps with insulin resistance because the lipids, the inability to use those lipids, increases the insulin resistance. Uh, really helps because of energy. It helps with fertility, reproductive health. We've seen that both in men and women. Helps with athletic performance, neuroprotective because you're using the energy in the brain, so it helps with that. Just overall, it helps with metabolic flexibility. And then there's an acetyl L-carnitine, so there's an acetyl group on it that's good for the nervous system. But man, I think okay, you're probably not going to get enough of that in somebody without, or you're not going to be able to mobilize that fat without some good supplementation on the L-carnitine.
You know what's
So
go ahead.
no, that's it. I think it's an amazing product.
I think a lot of patients have been asking me, what are we going to do when AOD is pretty much gone now. The peptide AOD and the compounding pharmacies I'm working with are pretty much finishing up their supplies. And I think it was actually one of the things I was going to talk to you about more one-on-one, not even on the podcast, but it sounds like that's going to be my replacement for AOD, because I use
Oh,
AOD as more of a fat mobilizing agent to pair up with the tirzepatide in the fasting. So you get this massive caloric deficit. We want to increase the efficiency of the weight loss coming from more fat. And so AOD helps, but it really sounds like L-carnitine, in summary, really aids your body's ability to just shuttle fat, mobilize it, and utilize it, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
so it's interesting. So we're going to have to definitely get into that later.
Yeah, and I'd say dosage wise, like you can go up
Yeah,
to like 1.5 grams on that. Um, you know, 1 gram, 1.5. So you're looking at 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams a day with L-carnitine, and that's a really good amount.
just once a day in the morning.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's excellent. And along the same lines of that. So I'd say especially if I'm like targeting weight loss, what am I going to do? I want to bring down insulin resistance. I want to because these GLP-1 agonists, the combo, I think that's going to be like if we're going to bring in like a GLP-1 support, affects the gut, improves the gut microbiome, improves insulin resistance, breaks down lipids. I'm going to go with berberine. We use berberine quite a bit because we get a lot of PCOS cases, a lot of the insulin resistance, and you're going to see a lot of PCOS cases in your realm for sure. But it's anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial. People have chronic gut issues, and it even there's some research that shows that it's beneficial for certain types of cancer. So
Wow, I haven't seen that.
yeah, yeah, it has an anti-cancer effect because it interferes with the cancer life cycle. But because most cancers are that Warburg effect, where they're using um, glycolysis without using the mitochondria and they're basically making lactic acid. That's what the Warburg effect is, and berberine really helps that process, or it blocks it. So
Is it,
it's amazing compound.
is it working, similar mechanism of action by blocking glucagon release?
Yes,
Okay,
right. And so it improves that insulin sensitivity.
gotcha.
So
Okay. Okay.
very powerful.
Yeah,
Very.
yeah, and I mean, do you have any experience with comparing it to the effects of metformin itself, or?
Yeah, so it's really effective. We had a patient that had been on metformin and went to berberine, and they actually dosed a little high. So a lot of the supplements I see are like 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams. 500 is enough. If you hit 1,000, you're going to know you got too much in a day because you're going to get loose stool,
Yeah.
and you might even get some cramping, and you can back it off down to 500, and people do really, really well with it. So
Yeah, I think that's definitely something for a good transition for a patient who's coming off of GLP-1 medications, closer to their weight loss goal, at their weight loss goal. What a good stepping stool, right? For them to get some blood sugar
yeah,
control from an external supplement, right? Uh,
totally.
Okay. Okay, cool. So we're at that point. We're probably 2/3 through this webinar or through this podcast. So I want to transition to autoimmune disease. That was sort of the next big thing. I know that is one of the heavy areas that I mean, autoimmune is just, it's complex, man. It really is. Please start by just defining for the layman out there, what is autoimmune disease and how does it affect your overall health and then ultimately weight loss?
Yeah. So first, autoimmune it's where your immune system, for one reason or the other, it's become reactive to your own tissue. So it basically sees aspects of your own body, some very specific tissues in your own body, as a foreign invader. And it's like, okay, we got to get rid of that. So it starts to attack it and no longer recognizes that your own tissue is you and that it's not a foreign invader. So that's really the basic autoimmune. It's your body, your immune system starts to think that certain specific tissues in your body are foreign invaders, and so it mounts an attack against it.
Okay.
It's and it's a very simple explanation, but the complexity of autoimmunity is amazing, and it can involve any aspect of the immune system. So it doesn't have to be antibody specific, but that's usually how we detect it. We're looking for antibodies, and antibodies usually don't kill anything. Less than 20% actually are neutralizing. Most antibodies are just a marker
Like a
to
flag.
say, hey, yeah, like a flag at a golf course. And your other white blood cells are like Pac-Man, and they come in and they go after anything that's got a tag in it. And by releasing chemicals, chewing on it, engulfing it, there's all kinds of ways. But there are 9 really particular molecular pathways that are known currently, that are pretty well defined, that can drive. And I hear a lot of practitioners say, autoimmune starts in the gut. It doesn't. It doesn't have to start in the gut. There's 9 very, very different pathways. There is usually some involvement because of a chemical that's produced by gut bacteria that helps your immune system regulate itself. But for the most part, you lose what's called tolerance or identification that that's me, and that can happen from some really complex pathways, and then your body starts getting destroyed. And so you have to you have to take a step back and say, okay, how do we get that under control? So in the world, and my gosh, we could probably do
Several.
hours, yeah, of autoimmune. But when we're talking about weight loss specific, there are a couple autoimmune. The first two autoimmune issues that we're going to see standing out is obviously autoimmunity against the thyroid,
Right.
right? That's the most common autoimmunity in the world is Hashimoto's disease, and that's where the immune system is targeting one of two very specific tissues in the thyroid and or enzymes and protein in the thyroid, and it's destroying your ability to either make thyroid hormone or use that thyroid hormone. And that's a really complex one. And that just slows down the metabolism. And so that's going to be weight loss associated with nearly the whole body because thyroid hormone regulates systemic metabolism, right? So that's a full body. And then the next one is going to be the autoimmune diabetes, which is usually like a type 2. It's adult latent onset diabetes. They're going to have some damage there to the pancreas, or you can actually get it to the insulin receptors. But a chronic inflammatory response leads the body to start to damage the pancreas, and they can become insulin dependent, but not all of them do. And you don't treat that like regular diabetes. You treat it like it's autoimmune, right? And that's the huge failure of our medical system is when it's Hashimoto's and you're attacking the thyroid, or it's diabetes brought on by autoimmunity. They don't do anything for the immune system. All they do is wait for the tissue to be destroyed and replace the hormone that was being destroyed, which is crazy because 50% of autoimmune diseases bring on a secondary and a tertiary autoimmune disease. So those are the big two.
Don't they say that having one autoimmune disease is like, I don't know what the statistic is, 4 to 6 times more likely of developing more? Do you know the actual statistic on that? I wanted to interrupt the show to tell you guys about the free resources that I have for you to be successful in 2024. The link in the show notes is going to provide you a way to join the free Facebook community. We do weekly live training. It's a great community. We'll answer all your questions with or without the medications. We're going to help you get there. And there's a free PDF which breaks down the steps so that you know exactly what to do, how to do it to be absolutely successful this year for your weight loss goals. Now back to the show.
Yeah, it's right now it's like they said it's almost 50%. Like 50% of the people who have it's going to get a second one, and some people get third and fourth. Polyendocrine autoimmune is a really is a big problem because when you don't get a hold of that, and doctors, if you're out there and you have Hashimoto's or you have autoimmune diabetes, and they're like, I got my autoimmunity under control. No, they don't. They have your thyroid hormone being replaced. It's not under control.
Right.
And because the immune system is not being addressed, you're going to get another autoimmune that may not be hormone related at all. It could be like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. You want to get on top of that.
100%.
And then, and then the next autoimmune that I'd say is going to, that can contribute to weight management issues is going to be your adrenals. So adrenal autoimmunity, where you could be triggering too much cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, drive up your blood sugar that way. And then you got insulin resistance, and then you got to fix the insulin resistance too. So I'd say when it comes to autoimmune, those would probably be the top 3 that we're going to see. Hashimoto's overwhelmingly being number 1, and then the diabetes due to autoimmunity, the adult latent onset diabetes is going to be number 2.
Okay. So I can tell you were very careful with what parts you focused on and what parts you didn't, because I know I could tell getting into what causes autoimmune is probably just insane.
Oh my gosh. It's, just to run down the list, usually the most common is molecular mimicry, which means either a chemical, a bacteria or virus or a fungus or fungi, or a food has a similar amino acid structure to something in your body, and you have a response to it. There's something called bystander activation. It doesn't need an antigen. We got polyclonal antibody or polyclonal activation, which is another one. We have this one called super antigen response, which I think we saw a lot with COVID, where it's just this massive immune response that got out of control. We got cryptic antigens. We got something called epitope spreading, citrullination,
Ooh.
even autophagy. You can develop autoimmunity because of an irregular autophagy regulation. So dysregulation of autophagy, and then something called haptenation, where chemicals or medications can bind to a protein and change that protein, and it now looks like a foreign invader. So those are your 9, and those are, my gosh, we could we're talk about the rabbit hole of rabbit holes. This is like the doom rabbit holes.
For sure. And I mean, trying to just summarize it, if possible. If not, that's totally fine. Or, more, not summarize it in terms of like entirety, but what's the common theme? What's the common trend that sends people down the path of developing any one of those? Can we just keep it simple and say that like we talked about last time when we defined optimal health, and anything that's a deviation from optimal health, less efficiency from the body. So as the health declines, is it just your susceptibility to developing autoimmune disease paired with bad luck, or is there genetics? Like, kind of, if we could just kind of get some sort of semblance of that.
Yeah, I think that's no, we can definitely. So there are this kind of like these trifecta pieces that we typically see. So one is that people do have some type of genetic predisposition. You don't have to, but usually there's some aspect in how the immune system works, controls itself, or identifies, your own tissue. So there's some type of genetic predisposition that gets triggered because of all these other issues.
Right.
Another piece that usually you'll see there is a disruption in the gut because the gut has all this membrane where you have all this bacteria that's just teeming and just growing in your gut. And if you start getting dysfunction in your gut, the bacterial toxins or the bacteria themselves start to cross the gut barrier, and that just overwhelms the immune system. But also the gut bacteria produce butyrate, which is really critical for immune regulation. And the other reason the gut's also in there is because like things like vitamin D and glutathione and your B vitamins are necessary for this regulatory cells that protect you against autoimmunity. And so when your gut's disrupted, you're not absorbing those things. You're getting things in you're not supposed to. And so there's a multi like point PowerPoint I could do on saying, hey, this is how the gut contributes to autoimmunity. So the gut is a big one. And then number 3 is a triggering stressor. And that could be stress. It could be disrupted sleep. It could be you get an infection. It could be you can't get rid of the accumulation of toxins that you're getting in your diet or in your day-to-day, like breathing air and your water. It can be because the blood sugar has been dysregulated for too long and weakens. But what you're going to do is you're going to get something that weakens the immune system, right? So basically, that combination, it's like the gut, a genetic predisposition, it's some type of trigger that just really throws your body for a loop. And it doesn't have to be very strong. It just could be a continued trigger for a long period of time.
And is it Likenson like a switch, and then once that switch is turned on, now it's like we could turn it off, but it's not that simple anymore because it's been turned on. So that's the thing. Once it's been turned on, there's a lot more effort to get it off again.
Right. So, and to be clear, and just for the clarity on that is, once that bell has been rung,
right,
that's out there. You have those, especially if it's an antibody, because you have these memory cells. Now, there is some research going on looking at some specific targets to basically make your memory cells basically forget the autoimmune. It's crazy.
So a true switcher offer, right? A true, wow.
Yeah, but to this day, nobody's won a Nobel Prize in medicine for curing autoimmunity. Now, you can get people in remission.
Mission.
And
Yeah.
so the goal when we're going after autoimmunity is two key pieces. One, get the people as close to remission as possible. And number two is to create as wide a gaps between flares as possible. Those are your two biggest things. And that's very possible and it's very real. There are going to be cases out there where, they're going to go see every specialist in the world. They're never going to quite get into remission, and all they can really do is manage their symptoms, unfortunately. But man, there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot of life and quality of life that can be brought on by a really solid treatment strategy.
Yeah. I know we can do more episodes later, getting into more weeds of LDN or of autoimmune disease. Actually, the LDN is on my list. I'm just checking to see how we're doing. Okay, so bringing it back to supplements. Now we're talking about autoimmune overweight. We've gone through the list so far. What modifications are we making, or are we adding for the autoimmune overweight patient trying to lose weight?
Okay, this is where I'd bring in turmeric and resveratrol.
Okay.
For multiple reasons. They improve detoxification. They're going to reduce all the oxidative stress that's caused by, the fat. And when people, man, that's a big thing. Is we've had cases where we had an autoimmune case. The person came in, they didn't know they had it. They had all this body weight. We start working on their immune system we start working on their thyroid. They start losing weight. Well, when you lose weight, I saw a study from Germany. It showed, and I think we talked about this in the last podcast. It's like when you lose, it was 22 kilograms equated to an increase of 15% in circulating toxins, because that's what's in the fat, and it's part of the reason people would do detox to lose weight. So you lose the weight, you free up these toxins, massive load on the liver gets stressed, gut gets stressed, triggers the immune system to then trigger. You can get autoimmunity that way if it's not done correctly. So when people are going after mass weight loss, they need to be working with a professional like you. But the big piece though there is, one, support those processes. There's some good evidence that turmeric and resveratrol are protective against the destruction that the immune system is trying to do when they're taken together. So those two are a huge key piece. Again, in this situation, vitamin D is incredibly important. In this one also, I would supplement with some glutathione.
Okay.
Glutathione keeps the barriers tight, helps the liver, helps the oxidative stress, supports it. There's really good evidence there. And the dosing on that is going to be person dependent. You got to figure out what's actually going to work with them, on what they need. But those are, I'd say, those are the big ones. Now, autoimmune, if you have weight to lose and you have an autoimmune disorder or condition that is contributing, this is one of those cases where an autoimmune paleo style diet is going to be critical. You want to make sure that your diet is not triggering the immune system in any way.
There's no overriding that. There's no overriding that.
Yeah. No, that's a critical response. So I'd go, my tops would be turmeric resveratrol. Turmeric resveratrol, like a brand specific one. Add in the glutathione, go AIP. And this is where, especially with your clients, I'd have them talk to you about, hey, there's some good peptides that are going to help immune modulation, but can also help aid in their metabolism.
Yeah, and I want to finish on that because we're getting there. So this will be the last question. Low dose naltrexone. Do you have any experience with it? What's your thoughts on it? Being as how you have done so much with autoimmune, where does LDN fall into the equation as far as solutions for you and treatment options?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this by talking about what it does, right? So when the part of the immune system that helps protect you against autoimmunity is these T regulatory cells. And those are the ones I was saying, okay, we need vitamin D, we need glutathione, we need your B vitamins. Even testosterone here is very protective. but you need endorphins or these neuroopiates. And so the low dose naltrexone, when you take that, most people will take it at night. It makes your brain think, or it tells your body, hey, we don't have enough opiates. It's an opiate receptor antagonist. And so it makes your body think it needs to make more. So you get this higher increase in endorphins, these opiates that, one, are anti inflammatory, two, they also improve the function of the T regulatory cells. So a lot of people, they think, oh, I'm gonna. You can get pain relief from it, but it's not from an opiate. It's not an opioid at all. It actually has a completely different mechanism, but helps your natural endorphins. So it's really powerful for certain autoimmunes. Some people take it, they don't get any response at all. Other people, you can get them as close to remission as you could any other way.
We've
It's
seen that.
so
Yep.
good. Yeah, so effective. Yeah, that's we break that out, especially when we have cases that aren't typically responding to diet, lifestyle, nutrition interventions pretty quickly. But yeah, you titrate up, and you can start at like zero point 0.5 to 1 milligram, and you can build up to 3 to 5. Five's on the high end. Most
Right.
people, they find 3 milligrams seems to be a sweet spot, but our medical staff would, prescribe that when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But it can be life changing.
I couldn't agree more. And with that, Dr. Dan, we are out of time. I don't know about you, but I'm actually thinking gut should be the next episode. I mean, autoimmunity is great, but I was just, when you said gut earlier, I was like, duh, like that, such a huge piece. And you've been helping me with my gut, and we can talk about that too. I'll share it up, but I'm looking forward to that. So with that being said, thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Look forward to it.
Awesome. Talk to you later.